Welcome to episode 23 of Published. Today I'll speak with Justin Foster and Emily Soccorsy of Root and River Branding about best practices for marketing your book.
Welcome to Published, a podcast by Greenleaf Book Group, where we'll discuss the ins and outs of the publishing industry, from writing a book and finding the right publisher to gearing up for a book launch. And now, here's your host, Greenleaf Book Group CEO, Tanya Hall.
Welcome back to Published. In our last episode, we went back to the beginning of the book writing process to talk about outlining, and today we're going to jump ahead to focus on best practices in book marketing. So there are so many books published every day, it's very important for authors to promote their own work regardless of whether or not their publisher offers marketing support alongside that. Like any type of marketing, though, it's important to approach the audience the right way from the start. So taking the wrong tone or choosing the wrong marketing methods can obviously result in lost book sales, which no author wants and no publisher wants. So in this episode, we'll answer some questions like, how do I build a long-standing relationship with my readers? And what does it mean to have an authentic brand? And what are the right tactics for marketing my book? So joining me today are Justin Foster and Emily Soccorsy, founders of Root and River, a branding agency right here in Austin, Texas. They help leaders find their brands and share their messages with the world, and they're here to talk about how brand authenticity and a focus on relationships can build loyal and enthusiastic audiences. So let's get into the interview. All right, Justin and Emily, welcome to Published.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're happy to have you today. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what you do and how you came to found Root and River together?
Absolutely. So we believe every great brand is a spiritual experience. And that was really what we call a root belief that drew Justin and I together. We met about 4 years ago at a conference, and we began quickly sharing ideas around branding and modern marketing, and just the rebellious way we were both looking at it, which really had to do with organizing brands around love and truth instead of the status quo, which had been creating manufactured reality and selling that to the public through blunt force trauma marketing, as we would call it. And
I love that.
Both of us had a passion for finding that inner truth, that inner root belief and message, and really helping people discover that place in their heart and making that the center of the brand. And so we quickly began to experiment with that. I was a corporate in corporate communications and marketing, and actually hired Justin to come in and begin helping me transform that brand that I was working for. And through that collaboration, we thought, well, we can share this with other people, and began to work with people who are drawn to us and who were open to the branding process as a journey, instead of this idea of marketing being a department or a job description for one person in an organization. We really love to pair with leaders who want to take an inward journey to uncover that core truth and then share it with the world.
Mm-hmm. Boy, that's a very powerful way of stating that. I love the idea of the brand as a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, we began, Tanya, to attract really out of the gate with Root and River thought leaders. And these were either consultants or coaches often. Many of them were in the process or had already written books. And I think what the draw was, and we still attract a lot of thought leaders. We had a session with one here in Austin, Texas last week, who's a thought leader around documenting via video family stories. And also he's an author and a speaker. And so there's this consistent pattern, and we've often wondered what that is. And I think it's because we work from the inside out, we are not giving marketing advice. We're not trying to compete with marketing advice that here's what you should do. You should have ClickFunnels, and you got to be on Facebook ads. And we don't do any of that stuff. We will give counsel on the right kind of marketing to use, but it's in alignment with the thought leader, the author, the speaker's personality, strategic goals, the audience they're trying to reach. And so it's this non-formulaic view that every person that has something to say, is driven or called to a mission of sharing ideas and thoughts that advance humanity, they don't need marketing advice. They just need some coaching and guidance to go inward to learn how to articulate their root belief and to amplify their brand to the world.
That's such an interesting way to set that up, because I think something I see time and time again with authors is they look at marketing, as you said, as a checklist, really, of all of these different initiatives that they or someone else has to knock off, often all at once. And it becomes overwhelming and exhausting for them. And I think one of the reasons for that is so often it is not in their authentic voice, and it's not true to what they're trying to accomplish with writing the book in the first place. Would you agree?
Definitely. We think overwhelm is the number one thing that we hear from our clients, just completely overwhelmed by marketing. It has become this behemoth, and it has demanded of any entrepreneur and authors, speakers, so much of their business acumen. They feel that they have to do it. And so it becomes this burden, and it becomes overwhelming, and they don't know where to begin. And so we steer them back into themselves. And through that process, it helps to clarify what they want to do in the marketing space. And we always coach our clients to find the thing that they have the most energy for and to be as consistent as possible there. And that's like a great place for them to begin.
Yeah, agreed. It has to be sustainable for them. So you've written on your blog about, which is an excellent blog, by the way, about Golden Rule marketing. And I want to dig into that a little bit for our audience. So can you start by explaining the concept for our listeners?
Absolutely. So the concept is that marketers are the most egregious violators of the Golden Rule, which in this context is market unto others as you would have them market unto you. So, but marketers, they tend to, as Justin mentioned, do ClickFunnels and interruption marketing and marketing that's really around manipulation and persuasion. Earlier, I mentioned blunt force trauma, sort of diluting, just trying to be everywhere and push your message, and oftentimes a muddy message at that. If you're talking to a marketer, but you're talking to them as a human being, and you ask them, what kind of marketing do they personally enjoy, or what have they responded to recently? It's usually never those things. So we like to hold up that mirror. We do like to hold up mirrors to people and tell some hard truths so that we can really get to a place where we are marketing as human beings first. We believe the era of business to business, business to consumer, whatever all those labels are, is over, that we are now in the human age. And so as people, first of all, we need to think about the other people we're trying to reach and how we might tailor that to them in a way that is non-manipulative and more inspirational and educational.
Yeah, if an author, and we put thought leader as kind of the general category for what would be an author, speaker, etc. If they follow this golden rule of marketing, they are reinforcing a core principle of 21st century branding, which is the way you market has far more impact on your brand than what you market. One of the first experiences that a company, an audience would have is how you market to them. And if you're using those dark arts of manipulation that are most common in marketing, then you're sending a statement about your brand that may not even be true. That the author, the speaker, may not even be aware that that's how certain types of marketing are perceived. Thus the golden rule, as the literal golden rule too.
Mm-hmm. So to help our audience better understand this concept, can you perhaps give us an example of golden rule marketing at its best, and then maybe another example of marketing that is the opposite of the golden rule, that is, I think, as you've put it, more interruptive?
First of all, it will vary slightly from person to person, but providing information in this age, we are deluded. We're just bombarded by information. We get 4,000 to 6,000 requests, demands for our attention and action each and every day. So breaking through that clutter is obviously difficult. We suggest the way to do that is to be heartfelt. So if that means putting out blogs, you mentioned our blog earlier, and we do our best to be very intentional and heartfelt about what we write. We don't write just for the sake of having a blog and crossing that task off our to-do list, is actually really diving deeply into the minds and hearts of the audience, but at the same time diving deeply into our heart and trying to provide that information. And that doesn't mean you never send it out. Send that out. Send that out in a way that is inviting people into the ideas instead of trying to persuade and convince and make a sale. So think of it as as if you are building a relationship. You're dating your audience, basically, and you really want to share a little bit of who you are in order to form that foundation, as Justin mentioned, that brand. One of my favorite things that authors do that I find to be very effective is if they are open on with their publishing on their blog, talk about their experience in writing a book, talk about perhaps the challenges that they had, and sort of peeling back the curtain so I can make a connection with them as a human being. I think that would be an example of golden rule marketing.
And I would add to that authors are artists. They have the same, or we, since we're all of us on here are on this visit are authors. We're artists first, and if we think like an artist, then the golden rule marketing even makes more sense. So, for example, show your work. It's as Emily said, kind of that behind the scenes of what it's like to write a book. So show your work, show your drafts, show the things that maybe that didn't make the cut, that type of thing. The second is to be original. There's so much what we call karaoke singers. It's just people that are parroting what they hear from other people and calling it their own. If you're original, then golden rule marketing fits great. If you're not original, if you're just following someone else's formula, then golden rule marketing is still a good idea, but it really loses its efficacy if you're not being original. And then finally, be consistent. If you're gonna do this type of golden rule marketing, you got to go do it. You got to do it in some form. It goes to one of our mantras, which is you got to create every day. You got to do something, even if a small 30-second thing, to advance your brand in an authentic, raw, organic way. If you do that every day, then you will attract you will attract a following. You will be able to convert that to sales, et cetera, et cetera.
That's great advice. I like the create every day especially. So it sounds like there's a lot of vulnerability sort of underscoring all of this golden rule marketing. Would you agree?
Definitely. It requires vulnerability. And that's the challenge of it. We often tell people, this is not an approach for everyone. You got to be willing to do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
that's okay. I was just going to say, as one of the tools that we provide, to your point, Tanya, about vulnerability, is one of the tools we provide after what we call a root session, which is a day-long retreat, immersion into your brand. It's called an open letter, and it's a coming out letter, as it were. It's of who you really are as a brand, and it's carefully vetted for well-crafted marketing BS. It's vetted that it speaks often in an authentic way, and that's really from probably, I would say, all of our customers that we've done. I think we've done 84 root sessions in the last 4 years. I think every one of them would be safe to say that they'd never marketed or shared their story that way, and it's extremely vulnerable. But vulnerability is such a powerful thing for your own personal journey and your own personal growth. And it's a little bit like humor. A real humor makes people laugh, and real vulnerability makes people pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very well said. So we talked a little bit about authenticity in there as well, and I think that is, again, something an author can lose sight of as they're going through this very busy launch period checklist of social media and blogging and podcast interviews and byline this article. So can you speak a little bit to brand authenticity? And I guess, first of all, how does an author know they're there? And how does that impact their overall journey, their experience with their audience and readers?
I think one of the difficult things whenever you're launching is that you get caught up in the launch, and we all tend to get disconnected from our true selves in those moments, and so it can be really challenging. This is why we feel like the inner work is so important to be done. We think it's great to do it sort of in advance of a big marketing push. But wherever you're at, I think taking time to move inward and look at the what is truly important to you. Like, this is a moment in time, but it represents your creative spark and your stick-to-itiveness and what does it mean for you? What is the deeper meaning? What is the bigger theme that you're really trying to get across? I think authors put so much effort into creating and completing and putting out into the world this baby of theirs. But sometimes, as parents, we can kind of get disconnected from why we intended, what our intentions were to begin with. And so rooting into that and getting as close as you can, whether that's by, putting that down on paper or writing down your intention and returning to that almost on a daily basis before you begin the onslaught of production and appearances and promotion, I think can really help keep you centered.
Yeah, and I think that when you do what Emily said, that rooting down inward, if you do that inner work, what will come of that is confidence in the inner voice. And we all have a built-in BS detector. It just gets silenced by the pressure and all the advice and the onslaught and the overwhelm that Emily referred to earlier. If you listen to that inner voice, you may not know what to do tactically all the time. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is you'll know what not to do. You know, if you get a piece of advice that, well, here's what you got to do, and fill in the blank, and your inner voice goes, I don't think that's the right approach for what I want to do, or how I want to represent myself in the world. And I think that inner voice then becomes that first check of whether or not you're on the right path towards authenticity. I think the second is affirmation from the people that are the recipients of your message. One of the things that we say to thought leaders is you're not a thought leader unless somebody comes up to you or sends you an email or said something like, I've never thought about that before. And if you start to hear, I've never thought about that before, you really made me think, or the way you share this idea, whether it be in the book or on a blog post or a speech or however they're delivering it, if you're getting people to think, then you're a thought leader and therefore you're authentic.
Yeah, I like the way that you phrased that. And that's no small feat either, because as you mentioned earlier, people are so inundated with other messages and just all of the clutter in this landscape. So having them pause, first of all, think, and then take the time to share that with you is really a compliment when it happens.
Just one more thing to add here is that we also work with our clients to help them determine their mission. So not a mission statement at all, because those are boring and nobody cares. But a mission, their personal mission. What are you here to do that only you can do is how we typically define that. And if you can root into that, for us at Root and River, our mission is to inspire leaders to go inward. It's very simple, and usually missions are. And so, as Justin was mentioning, that becomes a true north for us. When opportunities arrive, we try to orient to the mission, and then it's very clear to be able to determine what I want to do and what I don't want to do. I think it's easy in publishing to think the mission is to publish this book, and because that's the task at hand. But if you can root into that deeper mission, that's a great tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. So you Root and River. We talked about the root. Tell me about the river.
So branding is a practice, we believe, and it is something that you do every day in every conversation. And so we do brand discovery, and we uncover that truth. But it doesn't matter unless you can go out and be in the world speaking it and practicing it. You got to take that to the river and let it flow. So that means that we work at the word of mouth level. It's the only talk about the overwhelm of marketing. The only part of marketing that consistently works over time is word of mouth. And people sort of then dismiss it like, oh yeah, well, word of mouth. No, there's a lot that you can actually do with that. If you're consistent in the words, the language that you have selected and that you're using, and you're not giving in to kind of marketing talk, And then how you create experiences around your core beliefs, and that is the backbone of the brand. So, being consistent with those experiences, being mindful and attentive to how people experience you as a person. And then if they come to a talk or a reading, how the experience of your brand is conveyed, and paying attention to that is part of the river. And then producing, as Justin mentioned earlier, consistent content. And again, going to what gives you energy. If you hate Twitter, don't do Twitter. That's easy. If you love to write, which you may, but not all authors love to write.
Many of them don't by the time they're done with the book.
Maybe being consistent on Instagram, where you can be more visual with what you're trying to convey, or creating videos. Whatever gives you energy, let's focus in on that, and let's find a way to practice that so that your brand, your root belief should be the most exciting thing you talk about all day, and tap into that energy. And that is the river that we help our clients find.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Thank you.
We often refer to the river as how you show up in the world. This reinforces a central and probably timeless idea that people are not buying your book. They're buying you. They're buying they may be drawn intellectually to the title, and maybe aesthetically to the cover, but when you put yourself out there on a consistent basis as a original thinker, then they're buying you, and it's similar to, again, back to the artist metaphor simile, that a musician, they tour, they have downloads, and they sell merch. And authors can follow that same exact model. The touring is going out and building a brand via word of mouth, via that organic following. The downloads are the books, and maybe some corresponding e-courses or whatever is the post follow-up stuff. And the merch is the social media interaction that they get to have with an author.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you said about book buyers, readers making purchases based on buying the author, so to speak, or their brand or their message. And that's been proven out in research in our industry, that when researching consumer behavior, that is the overwhelming majority reason of why someone decided, yes, I'm buying this book. It was because they read something about the author, or they otherwise somehow relate to that person, not the title, not the book cover, not some play on words hidden somewhere in the cover copy.
Yep.
Great. Well, if you had to give one vital piece of advice to an author listening to our podcast today, where would you have them really focus their energy in terms of, like, what lesson do you really want to convey to them today?
I guess I would loop back to that mission question. What are you here to do that only you can do? That doesn't mean that, it's only like, it's like splitting atoms, that only you can do it, but you with your unique set of experiences, you with your education, with your failures, with your successes, what is it that you want to affect change? And a lot of times people stop themselves from going there intellectually because they're like, well, what does this have to do with what I'm, my book? Let go of that for a moment. Your mission always, once you find it, has a direct line of sight into what you're working on right now. And if you can uncover it, then it will be a source of endless energy for you. So I would encourage them to begin there.
And I would say that my one piece of advice to an author, it kind of depends on where they're at. If they've published a book already and maybe they're working on book 2, there's some variance to this piece of counsel, but is work on your brand first. You need the discipline and the structure of the writing schedule and all the great work that y'all do at Greenleaf to get authors published. They need all that from a structural standpoint to get the book done, but don't forget to work on your brand. Maybe that's the piece of it. Don't forget to get yourself out there. And I think it's important for authors to speak or think holistically, to think of themselves as a triple threat in writing the book, providing and doing speaking, and then social media engagement. If they can be a triple threat in those areas and show up consistently, then when the book comes out, they've already, to a large extent, built a following that they're just then monetizing or converting. But it takes, as Em said earlier, it's a practice. It takes discipline to do that, especially when you're overwhelmed and in the process of writing a book. And somebody once said that writing a book, especially a business book, is like changing a flat on a moving car. Is that very few authors get to pull over and write a book for a year and not go to work or serve clients or all that. And so we're very aware of that and respectful of that. But you still need to work on your brand every day.
Yep, that is a drum that we are beating here all the time. Work on the brand first. And like you said, it's a challenge for authors because I think also once you commit to writing the book and that energy is there, then it's almost like everything else has to move aside to make room for that in many people's minds. And it's a hard juggle in a busy life.
Yeah, well said.
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, Justin and Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really great advice, giving us a lot to think about, and we certainly appreciate your time today.
It was our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
It was fun. Thank you, Tanya.
You're welcome. Well, that's it for our episode today. We hope you've learned a lot and have some new energy to get out and promote your book. For notes and resources from today's show, go to greenleafbookgroup.com/episode 23. And if you've liked the show, please rate and review us on iTunes. It means a lot to have your feedback and certainly will help us make sure we're answering your most burning publishing questions. We'll be back next month with another new episode.
Thanks for listening to Published. To learn more, please visit greenleafbookgroup.com. And remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.